Hello everyone, James Hancock here, back to discuss episode 4 of Taboo. If you have not been following this show, this is the episode that I'm convinced is kind of the make or break episode to make a case for why people should be watching it, because the first few episodes were a bit of a slow burn with great scenes that kept me entertained and kept me on board and kept me invested. But I think it's safe to say now after episode 4 that this is must-watch TV. I think it's absolutely astonishingly entertaining. I had an absolute blast, and I think it's kind of hit a mid-season high. I believe it's only doing 8 episodes for the first season. So yeah, they chose a great episode to really bring the thunder. So without further delay on my part, let's dig into some of the details that made this episode so damn entertaining. This episode hits the ground running with one of the most traumatic scenes yet, where the actress Lorna Bowe essentially gets kidnapped by agents of the Crown for a crime that she totally did not commit, but was set up by their agents in order to have a case for stealing her property. They take her to a jail, they strip her, they threaten her with all sorts of rape and abuse and torture. However, they say they'll give her £1,000 and she'll be free to go if she turns over any and all claims that she has to her late husband's property to the Crown. Luckily, James is working behind the scenes to save her, and he goes to the East India Company, who is outraged that the Crown is trying to screw them out of what they really want for their own purposes. And so some of their agents arrive and they rescue her and send her home. But it's interesting now that the Crown and the East India Company are at odds with one another, and James is kind of caught in the middle. He's kind of the hinge of a seesaw, so to speak. So James hunts down his friend Godfrey, or his old friend Godfrey, who works part-time as a cross-dresser at a gay brothel, for lack of a better expression for it. At any rate, he takes the minutes at the East India Company meetings, and he tells him that under no circumstances is James going to be granted a monopoly of the tea trade around the sound that he owns. And Godfrey warns James that between the Crown's interests and the East India Company's interests, everyone that's close to James is essentially going to be crucified. And James calmly replies that he does not keep anyone around him who doesn't deserve it. So yeah, James has zero qualms or hesitation about his course of action. Now, this episode introduces a new character who's one of my favorite characters in the show. But Tom Hollander is playing a character by the name of Cholmondeley, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. Essentially, he's a chemist who's really good at concocting explosives, nitroglycerin and dynamite and gunpowder and all these things. And we see a great demonstration where he's demonstrating just what a few drops of one of his concoctions can do. But he's also like a dirty lecher and a drunk and a kind of a wild man and unpredictable. And there's this great scene where James comes to see him, and he's in the middle of having sex with this beautiful young girl, and James is totally unfazed and is like, oh, have I come to you at a bad time, or something to that effect. And I can't pronounce his name, so I'm just going to call him Tom Hollander. He essentially says that if a man is on the verge of ejaculating but doesn't, that the semen will essentially turn to poison and will narrow his wits. And then James calmly replies, well, then ejaculate, because we have business to discuss. I mean, just Tom Hardy is absolutely killing it with his just super lethal, blasé, I don't care attitude, and it's just delightfully entertaining to watch. But he's recruiting him to try and build gunpowder for him, because he's not going to be able to buy any from any other sources. So they go out to this factory that James owns, and there's this disgusting scene that I almost puked. Tom Hollander starts tasting the cow shit and tasting the pigeon shit and asking all these questions, because as it turns out, with a combination of pigeon shit, cow shit, human urine, preferably human urine from people who've been drinking alcohol, combined with the ashes from a certain type of wood. If you soak the ashes in the urine and combine it with the shit for a year, at the end of that time, you have gunpowder. Now, James, he's in a bit of a hurry, so he doesn't have a year to wait. And so he learns that with the addition of saltpeter, that the process can be accelerated to 4 weeks, which is going to lead to one of the big action set pieces of the episode. But as James is leaving his factory, there's this great scene where you can tell that something's wrong from the way his horse is acting, and this giant brute comes out of nowhere, starts beating the hell out of him, takes a blackjack, smacks him on the head, basically like bursts his scalp open, and you think James is down for the count. And as he's being dragged away, we have what is easily the most violent sequence yet, where James comes to, pulls out a knife, starts slashing at the guy's legs and hacking his Achilles tendons and ankles and that sort of thing, and then finds some meat hooks and hooks them into him and puts them up on display and then disembowels them. I mean, it is some ferocious stuff. And at first, we don't know where the agent has come from, but we find out toward the end of the episode. We also see a new wrinkle in this episode, which I don't fully understand yet, but it seems to be introducing a little bit of the psychic and or supernatural. Essentially, James is able to psychically visit his half-sister in a way that he can almost kind of create like a sexual encounter in their imagination. And she gets really, really turned on by these exchanges and very aggressively masturbating at home. And then her husband comes in and wonders what's going on. But I'm not 100% convinced I'm interpreting it completely correctly. But they do make a reference later on about how at one point James thought he was going insane when he realized that he had this ability and that he kind of refined it when he was in Africa. So if this show is dipping its toes into the world of the paranormal and the psychic, I'm all for it. I just don't know if I'm 100% interpreting what I saw correctly, but that appears to be the case. So the episode draws to a close with a great dual sequence where we have, in one setting, a party hosted by the Americans at this elaborate mansion that James and Lorna Bowe go to. And at the same time, he has Atticus and all the women from the brothel kind of working together to break into the docks for the East India Company in order to steal all the saltpeter they need, because that's the only ready supply. And it's great because you get a little bit of murder and mayhem as they're fighting their way in, but also the women are resorting to their feminine wiles to get past certain guards as well. And that's some much needed action. But the party is even more interesting. James is kind of losing his mind. He can't handle crowds. He's getting overstimulated by all the masks and that sort of thing. And Dumbarton basically makes an offer saying that he can guarantee safe passage for James and his half-sister to America, start a new life. All he has to do is essentially get on board with the American cause and sell his sound to them or do business with them. He didn't make any mention about the monopoly, so that appears obviously to be, I don't know, maybe being withheld. But then James has a very interesting meeting with the hostess, who is reputed to be a very, very successful whore who achieved great fame and fortune by marrying her way upwards. But now she is a double agent. She is Carlsbad, essentially the agent in charge of the American spy network in London. And through an elaborate magic trick, she and James get a little private moment. And she admits that she sent the giant brute to James to beat the hell out of him, and that she will resort to other tactics in the future. And James appears ready to negotiate with her, but in a weird way, he's just kind of adding the Americans to the seesaw as well. So now James appears to be in basically acute danger by both the Americans, the East India Company, and the British Crown, which is a very strange position for one man to be in when he has very, very few friends and allies, but he seems to like it that way. The episode draws to a close with a great bit where his half-sister's husband is just a drunken lush and acting like an idiot, and he's about to essentially call out James for having sex with his half-sister in the middle of this party. And James humiliates him, punches him in the gut, and drags him out. And the guy's so undone that he challenges James to a duel to the death at dawn. And the episode draws to a close with James having not answered yet. I think we all know that in a duel to the death, James could probably take on 10 of this guy because he is a complete weenie. And I've been waiting for James to eviscerate him since the show began. But whether or not that'll happen, who knows? In any case, this episode was an absolute blast to watch. Can't wait for episode 5. It's a shame the season's already halfway over, but hopefully, I need to do some research, but I don't know if the season 2 is on the way yet or not. Fingers crossed it'll happen, because this is a top-notch show. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you're enjoying Taboo. If not, go back to episode 1 and just work your way forward. I promise the payoff will absolutely be worth it. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel. Give me a shout on Twitter at Colbrax. Please check out my podcast, Wrong Reel, which is in the show notes below. And hope you all enjoy watching your television program. So long.